I'd like to welcome Gina Lake.
Hi, Grace.
Hi, Gina. So
nice to be back.
yes, it's good to have you back. And you found yourself headphones that take
Yes.
care of the echo. That's wonderful.
Yes, they even match my sweater.
Oh, perfect. How perfect is that? So there's some kind of humming in the background. Do you hear that?
I don't.
Okay. Okay. I won't worry about it then.
That's not.
So, Gina, I do very minimalist introductions today.
Sure.
Gina has published many books, and these days she's mostly publishing, but she's recently started offering spiritual mentoring also.
Again,
as she used to do that, but hasn't for a while. And somehow there's this opening that's there for people to reach you, which is interesting. I mean, because I imagine that's as much of a love offering as the books that are coming from you and that are given to the world. I mean, love offering, not in the sense that it's free, obviously, but love offering in the sense that it's an offering that is a loving offering.
Yeah, it's a very different thing, writing books and having people read them and not ever meeting the people and talking with people on the phone about their intimate experiences of their spirituality and their struggles and so on. It's very different.
Mm-hmm.
One is very reclusive.
Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting because the title you gave to your session is Love Equals Attention. So, and it's like obviously in writing books, you know, the attention is not giving to the readers maybe in the same way as you give attention to a person that you have a mentoring exchange with. So tell us about love equaling attention.
Yeah. Well, love is our nature, right? And attention, when you give love to whatever, when you give attention to whatever you're giving attention to, if you're really fully doing that and not lost in thought, then there is a natural outpouring of love from your being to whatever you're giving attention to. The only thing that can interfere with that experience of that outpouring of love is thought. But this being that we are loves thought too, and it loves everything. So
it gives attention to thought.
Yes, it gives attention to thought. But the tricky thing about thought is that thought is the one thing that exists that if you give your attention to it for very long, you identify with thought and with the virtual reality that's created by thought. And you can get lost in the ego's reality, in the virtual reality created by the false self. And that's a very different experience than giving your attention fully to, say, a bouquet of flowers, or your husband, or your dog, or anything else in your environment. If you give your attention fully to anything in your environment, anything in the real world, anything in reality, without the interference of thought, then you are being present to it, and that presence is your being, and your being is love. And so naturally flows from you when you are really in contact with reality, which is what being present is. It's being in contact with reality. And when you're in contact with reality, this being that you are is so in love with reality that love just flows to whatever it's in contact with. And as I said, the only thing that can interfere with that flow of love is that flow of love being intercepted, in a sense, by getting lost in thought. And and even then your being is loving the thought. But the funny thing about thought is that while your being is loving thought and loving the ego and loving the experience of being lost in thought or even lost in suffering, there's still the attention that you've given the thought has taken you outside, well, you can't really be outside of reality, but it's taken you into a piece of reality, a virtual reality created by the mind that is not juicy and not as fulfilling as being in contact with reality. And it is, when you're in contact with a thought, many times that thought is a lie. It's a partial truth. It often presents a belief that takes you away from love, like I'm not lovable or life is unfair. And if you get lost in a thought like that, you're going to have the experience of that thought and not the rest of reality. But meanwhile, even when that's happening, the being that you are is still on some level loving that experience, but you're probably no longer in touch with that being loving the experience. You're probably just in touch with that contraction that you're having because you got lost in the thought. So attention is so important. And as I said, the beauty is that no matter what you give your attention to, except thought, love will flow to it and you'll experience love. Because when love flows outward from within us, we call that love. You know, love isn't really something that we get from outside of us. Somebody can give us love and we still won't feel love. Love comes within us. And it comes within us when we are really fully present to whatever is in our experience in the here and now. And thought takes us outside the here and now into a made-up reality. And so that's why it isn't the same experience as when we're present here and now. And the being that we are is so in love with every aspect of life, even the suffering. But whatever attention is brought to anything, the being experiences awe and wonderment and love for that, whatever it's giving attention to. And, you know, it's really quite an amazing experience if you can be present enough to almost anything. You know, it could be the telephone that's sitting in front of me right now, or it could be the lamp over there, or it could be a plant. Maybe it's a little easier to feel the love, the natural outpouring of your beingness towards a plant or towards a person you love naturally or towards an animal. But truly, when you're really present, it is just in love with life in whatever form you're experiencing it. And that flow of love is so filling. It's really what we're all looking for. So that's what living from love means to me. It's living from this place that is in alignment with your natural self, which is naturally loving and naturally curious. I think another word for love, living from love, you could say is living from curiosity, from awe, from wonderment, because those are all qualities of self. It's in love with life. It's in awe of life. It's curious. It's fascinated. It's amazed at what it has created. And so that's really what we're all looking for, isn't it? To feel that way. And isn't it amazing to think that the only thing that can interfere with that is a thought? Is getting lost in a thought. Actually, even a thought can't interfere with it if you don't get lost in a thought. It's a matter of not putting your attention for too long on that thought. Because, you know, what happens is wherever we put our attention on, we merge with. You know, that's what meditation, for instance, meditation on a candle or on a mandala or on sound. If you're ever being very one-pointed with something, you merge with it. And what happens with thought, if we become very one-pointed on our thoughts, we merge with them. We identify with them. We become them, and we become lost in the reality that's created by thought, the false reality.
Now, that I just have one question about this. You know, that just occurred to me. It's usually said, and that's what you said too, when we're in thought, we're not in the present. We're either in the past or the future. But there is a version of being lost in thought and emotional drama that's really about the now. Like, you know, I'm not getting the love I want, or I'm not getting the attention I want. You know, this is not good enough. I want something better. Okay, when it gets to I want something better, then you know there's a thought about what could be better, but you know somehow there still seems to be like a focus on what's there right now and what's missing. You know, what's there right now and what's not good enough.
Well, that's a
Isn't
thought
that about the moment?
About the present. No,
okay.
A thought about the present is not being present. If you could be present to a thought about the present, but if you're really involved about a story about the present moment, that's the virtual reality. A story about the present moment is as bad as a story about the past or a story about the future. It's all a story. But you can be present to a thought about the present. You know, a thought of the present might be, I'm cold. I don't like being cold. And well, that's a practical thing. That's a useful thing. That isn't something you have to suffer over. And then your being would just naturally go get a sweater or something. But if it's a story about a story that you're bringing into the present moment, then it doesn't serve. But can you give an example of what you think might serve?
Well, okay, let's take your.
Are you thinking of an insight or something?
No, I'm just exploring this thing that, you know, that thought takes you out of the present into the past or the future. But I think sometimes it just takes you out of the present into thought. Like, for example, you know, if you're cold, okay, so you sit there and you're cold, and the story is, God, she never puts the heating up high enough. She knows that I'm always cold in her place. Why doesn't she put the heating up?
Yeah. There's two different...
And then, you know, we're lost in thought, but it's you know, it's about the present because there I am, I'm cold.
Well, there's functional thought, which is I'm cold. And, you know, the funny thing is you don't even really need that thought because you experience being cold. You would just go up and get a sweater, right? You don't even need the thought, I'm cold. So there's functional thought like that, which isn't a problem. You just, you know, it just corresponds to or accompanies some kind of action in the present moment. It might be just, so that's just functional thought. That really isn't a problem. It's, it only takes a second and it's gone. You've done something about it.
Yeah.
But if it's a story about the room's so cold and she knows that I get cold and all of that, well, that's a place of contraction because it doesn't feel good. And does it serve to have that story? It doesn't make you get up and get a sweater necessarily. It causes you and probably the person that you tend to relate to around that contraction. So what good is it? What good is it to contract like that? We think it serves. We think somehow that that's a useful thought. But when you really examine your thoughts, it's very hard to find a useful one. Even I'm cold is not particularly useful. The present moment has a wisdom, just an innate wisdom in it that causes you to move to respond in wise ways, to get a sweater if you need a sweater, or to turn on the light if you need a light, or to get up and leave if it's not a place that feels right to be. So there's just a natural wisdom that knows what to do in the present moment. And the mind just chatters on and has its own little commentary and story about it. What good is it? That's the source of suffering, really.
Yes.
Life is so much simpler. It's so much simpler than the mind makes it. And but it's not just that we want it to be simple, and that's good enough reason. But the truth is that, just as we were saying, these thoughts take us from love, which is what we really want. What is more important in life than to feel love and be loving? It's, isn't that what makes things go well in life? It's just think what a different world this would be if everyone felt love and behaved lovingly towards each other. This would be a completely different world. Everyone would be happy because love equals happiness. And everyone wants happiness. That's just the core thing. So how hard is it? We just have to really see the truth about our thoughts, and that they are the only thing that keep us from being present in the moment, and that means experiencing the flow of love that naturally comes from our being about life. When all of those thoughts are stripped away, when that virtual reality is stripped away, it's amazing how in love you feel. I used to be someone who didn't want to be here, for so many years. It's just like, what? This place is the planet of the apes. I don't want to be here. It's crazy, I wanted to not be here. And what a miracle it is for to really be in amazement and in gratitude for this life. It's quite a turnaround. So that's the difference. The difference is that when you're involved with the mind's reality, you don't want to be here. But the truth is that the mind is creating craziness. And once that's all stripped away, this is such a beautiful and amazing world. And aren't we amazing creatures? And isn't every creature an amazing creature? And you're just in awe at the intelligence that's created all of this. How did it do that? And what's going to happen next? And it becomes this adventure of, well, what now? And what now? And what now? And it's all good and it's all fine. And it's nothing to be scared of. So it's a trustworthy and beautiful and loving place. Then you can begin to have some fun. And then you can be nice to others.
Yes, the reality is that the less we're caught in our stories about others, the more loving we will be.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
we're just open to them being as they are.
And the more loving we are, the more we just naturally feel good about who we are. Because
Mm-hmm.
let's face it, a big reason why a lot of us don't like ourselves is because we don't like the person we become when we listen to our mind. We don't like the person, the judgmental complainer, whiner, mean person that we are when we're identified. How are you supposed to love yourself when you're identified with your mind? It's only when we are in touch with who we really are that we can really appreciate ourselves and find that love within ourselves for other people and
Mm-hmm.
have compassion for their egoic identities and the suffering they cause themselves by being lost in their virtual reality.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's so great to come home. It's
Yes.
so great that there is home. And what does that mean that there is home? What it means is that this is a loving universe. The fact that I can sit here and talk to you about love, the fact that you're even interested in talking about love, it's because that's what we all want. And why do we want it? Because that's what we're all about. And that's what we're all seeking to find. And that is what we all ultimately find. And what if it weren't that way? What if this weren't a loving universe? What if this wasn't a loving being at all? We wouldn't be having this conversation. So this is really, really good news that it really is just all about love. And the love is covered over by this illusion cast by the mind of, life shouldn't be this way, and I want this, and why can't I have that? And just all of this fighting with the way things are, instead of just floating down the river and going with the flow here. Because really, it's quite an amazing river.
Yes. Gina, I just have a question for you. Um, it seems to me there's a particular version about the story about life that that spiritual people have, or people who are naturally drawn into spirituality. And it's often, you know, I don't know, this may be just, I'm just going to take this where it takes me, okay? Um,
Go for it.
it just seems that there is, and people who are drawn to spirituality, to spiritual, to finding that which they are, which we are, there's a natural sensitivity to that, that's there. And then we experience the world, and the world not being loving, the world not being kind, the world being violent, the world being, especially children experience a lot of, aggression from other children. And if they're sensitive and naturally, have that natural inclination to be kind, they're often the target of a lot of aggression. So, so it's like there's a story that gets created about, and an experience that's really, that seems to support that, about the world not being a kind place. And then, of course, one doesn't
That's
want to be there, and one finds plenty of reasons for not wanting to be there, and the world being a terrible place. And so, and then the seeking starts, which often is a wanting to get away from that terrible world, into a place
yeah.
that's safe and that's loving and that's kind and that's beautiful and that's, everything that we're looking for.
Well, the
And
world is a terrible place is the ego's point of view.
yes, of
And that
course.
becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because
Right.
if you expect that it's a terrible place, you're going to be on your defensive. You're going to be involved with your egoic mind, and your
Mm.
egoic mind is going to continue to tell you lies, and it's going to create fear, and it's going to create aggression, and it's going to create the very world that is a terrible place.
Mm.
And so we, through our inner reality and our belief system, our state of consciousness, the egoic state of consciousness, we create this terrible world. You change your state of consciousness and you create a different world because you are different in the world. Because you see things differently, you react differently, people react differently towards you, and everything changes.
Mm-hmm. And that can be experienced. That can be experienced at a personal level for sure. But then there's also the collective level at which the world really still is quite a, quite a violent place. And there's a
Well,
lot
that's because
of
the
suffering.
majority of people are stuck in egoic consciousness. That's the
Mm.
state of our world.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're all trying to, you and I and similar teachers are trying to get this message across that the beliefs that the ego holds about the world are creating the very thing that it's complaining about.
Mm.
So we're trying to wake people up from that illusion. It's a very convincing reality. It's a very convincing illusion.
Yeah.
How do you change people's minds? You can't force people's minds to change.
Mm.
They have to see it when they're ready to see it. They have to see it, usually they see it, don't they, when they have suffered a lot, when
Mm.
they receive a big wake-up call, often.
Mm.
Suffering's the biggest wake-up call.
Yeah.
When you finally say there's got to be a better way, there's got to be a way out. And there are
Mm.
people in this world who've always had the answer to that question, who always knew the way out of suffering,
Mm.
and were happy to provide it in books or teachings and spiritual teachings. That's the whole purpose of spiritual teachings, is to point the way out of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way out. And that is proof that this is a loving universe, that there's love behind it all, because there is a way out. If there wasn't a way out, then the ego would be absolutely right. This is a terrible reality.
Mm.
But there's a way out. And it's in your hands. Find the way out. That's really good news too, because in fact it is up to you, because no one else can. They can help you, they can support you to find the answer, but in the end you have to choose in every moment to not buy your thoughts, to not buy those lies, and to stay present in the moment, and to find the place within you that is fully in love and gratitude and awe and wonderment over this world. It's always there, that place. It's always there. And when you turn your attention to that place inside yourself that is totally in love with life, no matter what's showing up, then you will be in love with life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're going to experience, and that's what you're going to express. And that will be your reality. It's always there.
Gina, there's it just strikes me. I'm just touched by the radicality of what you're saying. Because, you know, there's New Age thinking and it says, oh, the reality is what you create. And often it seems to come from a place that's just wanting to control our reality, right? Making it a better reality.
Yes.
But when that comes from the radical insight that really thought creates a reality just because it does when we let it, then it's actually, I mean, it's just, I don't know, I'm just struck by the sheer radical revolutionary nature of that insight, you know? I mean, it's totally it's just mind-bogglingly powerful.
Well, I like to make the distinction between creating our reality and creating our experience of reality. Because we do create our reality, but I would beg to differ with the law of attraction people and others who say we entirely create our reality, which I think is very egocentric. We don't create everything that we experience. There's karma, and in a sense we create that, I guess you could say. We create that. But we don't create every experience that we have, every experience that comes towards us. We don't cause people to say things to us. But we do create our reality by how we respond to whatever we're experiencing.
And even by perceiving how we do, right? I mean, it's already there. Because if cold is perceived as a lack of respect for, you know, my sensitivity, then you know, already the reality is created at that level of perception, because, you know, then it's no longer just cold, but it's actually a disrespect of my needs.
Yeah, and what you're creating there is trouble in your relationship with that person through that perception. Whereas if you just, there are other ways to handle that issue between that person than to tell a story and then to say that to the person or argue or complain about it with the person. There are rational ways of handling such differences with people. And that creates a positive relationship and a different experience of life.
Yes, I mean, well, maybe I would say, you know, there are more loving ways of handling that reality, which would be just to say, look, I'm cold, you know, would you mind putting up the heating?
Yeah, and what can we do about that? You know, if the person has some argument for not doing that, we can say, what can we, where can we come to an agreement on that? You know, what kind of compromise, or what can we do about it so that we are both okay with it, with the situation?
Yes.
Yeah, and that would be the loving thing to do in a relationship. You consider what is good for both of us. What is the best thing that we can do together to ensure that that everyone is happy, at least as best as somebody can do. Compromises aren't, you know, perfect, but that's life, right? Yeah. I know I grew up learning, and maybe this is a female thing, but I learned to bitch about things, to as a way of saying what I wanted, to complain, you know. And my wonderful husband, Nirmala, he just looks at me and says, "Can you just ask?" So obvious. It's so obvious, but how funny. I couldn't even see that, for so long. I couldn't even see it was maladjusted for me to not know how to just simply ask in a rational tone of voice for what I wanted. Now it's just funny. Yeah. So there's always a way with love. There's a way to do anything in a loving way.
And it takes time to unlearn what we've learned on the basis of the stories that we've created about reality, right? I mean,
that's for sure.
It just doesn't automatically fall away from one day to the next. I mean, and there's a certain humility that comes in with that, It's like,
we need humility and compassion. We need compassion for how really difficult it is being a human being with this conditioning.
Yes.
It is, and that's that compassion comes from being present to your own suffering and being present to other people's suffering. Then the compassionate being that you are, it just feels that instead of judgment.
Well, and also just seeing how strong the programming can be. And how with the best of intentions, it can be hard to kind of undo it. I mean, sometimes things are just running us. And we get better with time, but sometimes it still comes out like that, even though I know better than that.
I think this is one of the messages that I give most often in my consultations with people, that people need to hear, is to be compassionate with yourself, to be gentle with yourself, because these things do take time. And I've often described it as like chopping down a tree, and I might have even said this in my last interview with you. But
go ahead, say it again. It's a good metaphor.
It is, because when you're chopping down a tree, a big tree, it doesn't feel like you're accomplishing anything. You're whacking away at it, and nothing's happening. The tree's still standing. And that's how it can feel when we are present to our conditioning, present to our thoughts, present to our feelings with compassion and awareness and acceptance. We do it over and over and over again, and it seems sometimes, of course this is the ego's voice, seems like it's not working, it doesn't matter, this isn't helping. That's what the ego says. But then one fine day, you swing that axe and the tree falls. And honestly, that is what my experience has been, is that all of a sudden, one day, you wake up and you realize, I'm not thinking those thoughts anymore. Where are they? I'm not angry anymore. What happened to that anger? What happened to that bitchiness? What happened to that those obsessive thoughts? They're gone. So our spirituality and our spiritual growth is very mysterious. We really don't understand from the level of mind and can't assess from the level of mind what is going on deeper levels of our unfoldment. And we are always making progress. We are always, as long as we are making an effort, as long as there is some sincerity, some intention to overcome the negative conditioning, the limiting conditioning, the unkindness. As long as there is some intention we are making progress. And we need to know that. We need to remind ourselves of that. So we don't get discouraged and stop intending it, right? The mind would just as soon have us go back to it and just be a cranky bitch.
Yes.
Because it's not working anyhow. I might as well be a cranky bitch.
That's right.
But fortunately, it doesn't feel good to be a cranky bitch. And so life shows you, it points you in the direction of love because it doesn't feel good to not be loving.
Yes.
Yeah. So see, it's such a benevolent universe. It points you in the right direction.
That's the saving grace, right? It doesn't feel good to not be in that flow of love in a more connected and conscious way.
So we can't help but learn. We can't help but grow. That's how loving this world is, this universe is. It's set up so that we learn to love. It's the only direction we can go, and we can slow our progress down and we can backpedal a little, but in the end, we're going to move forward and become more loving and more peaceful. And that's the course of our world, too. It's going to become more loving and more peaceful. It will get there.
That's an interesting conspiracy theory. The conspiracy of love to take everybody back home, finally back into its fold.
Yeah. It's a good one.
And it's true.
It's completely true. It's completely true. Really good news. So the more you experience the love that is this being that you are, the more you want to experience it. And it just becomes unacceptable to go back to being a cranky bitch or whatever.
Actually, it becomes unbearable, right?
Unbearable.
I mean, it's just too. It doesn't feel good. It's just.
Why would you?
Why would anybody want to be there?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So the conditioning becomes loosened up enough that you aren't so much in its control. And then you can really begin to make faster progress. Once you get to a certain point, your progress can really speed up. It's just hard getting to that, it's hard getting over some initial humps, seeing the truth, because we love our suffering to some extent. We love our thoughts. We love our drama. And, you have to start to fall in love with no drama first. You have to begin to start to love no drama before you're ready to let go of the drama. You have to have a taste of what it's like to live without drama, to have peace and love before you're really ready to let go of that drama, because the drama's it's rewarding on a certain level.
It's very alive.
Yeah, and if everyone around you, if you surround yourselves with other people who are in their dramas, then you don't even know that there's some other way to live. So when you start to discover that there's another way to live that doesn't entail drama and suffering and emotional pain, then you start wanting to find out more and more about that, how to live from that place. And that's what living from love is. It's living from that place where there's no drama. And the mind says, oh, this is boring. This isn't interesting.
Actually, I don't know. I think the mind realizes it's an acquired taste.
The mind gets weaker. Its opinions and its way of being just don't hold much sway anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
really gradual process.
Mm-hmm.
Slow. Takes a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, detachment from the egoic mind. There's so many levels of that. I'm just speaking from experience, is that, it's amazing when you realize that you're not your egoic mind. But then there
Mm-hmm.
is a, a continual deepening of that realization to the point where it's so obvious that that has nothing to do with you, that you have so little interest in it that you
Mm.
rarely pay attention to it. It's so not you.
Mm.
It's as if it's
Mm-hmm.
someone else's mind, crazy mind. So the detachment becomes so thorough at a certain point that it's easy. It's easy to not listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no interest, there's nothing particularly compelling or catchy about it. It's so obviously not true and useful.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I know it took me a long time to really become that detached.
Mm-hmm.
E-
Mm-hmm.
Even though I would say that I had an awakening many, many years ago, and so I discovered that, and my identity shifted away from that false self. I still would say, here I am 15 years down the road, and now, it's so much in the background that it's a very different experience than 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So there continues to be a deepening and falling into the moment, and
Mm.
the love of the being that you are becomes your ongoing state, not just something
Mm.
you can work yourself into,
Mm-hmm.
if by through affirmations or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's more like that's where you live from. You live
Yes.
from that
Yes.
love, and then the mind tries to pull you out, and sometimes you might go to some extent, and sometimes uh, you just immediately see that it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you for admitting that, Gina. Thank
Yeah.
you for thank you for sharing with us, because one of the ways that the mind gets crazy is by, with what Gangaji tends to call the spiritual superego.
Oh, absolutely.
And the spiritual superego would have it that we have to be in that loving state all the time.
Yeah,
It's like there's
yeah,
no excuse for not being there. And
yeah,
of course, that's just more thought. And it's just so much more compassionate, like you said, compassionate and loving and kind, to say, okay, I'm doing what I can, and if it takes
mm,
time, it takes time. And it'll take the time it'll take. All I can do is be willing to be as honest and truthful about what's happening.
yeah.
And,
And
you
pray.
know,
Pray
yeah.
too. Yeah, just ask for help to be the best you can be, to be the most loving,
Mm-hmm.
peaceful being you can be. It really helps
Yes.
to just ask for help too.
Yes.
That
Yes.
aligns us with it.
Mm-hmm.
But you brought up a point that makes me want to say that the idea of being a loving person, or radical happiness. I don't want people to think that I go around just oozing love and happiness. I don't look any different than any other person when I'm doing my groceries, and
Mm.
when I'm interacting with people. I don't know that this is something that necessarily makes you appear like such a wonderful, glowing person all the time. But it's just that you have access to a place of contentment and peace that just doesn't throw you into an ugly place.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I named my website Radical Happiness, and it
Mm-hmm.
was after my book Radical Happiness. And I think I at a certain point I wanted to remind people that this radical happiness doesn't look like you're smiling all the time. It doesn't look a certain way necessarily. It's just that it's that very subtle sense of okayness and love and peace, contentment, and gratitude that you feel just moving through life where you're not having a problem. You could say that it's the absence of a problem. It's the absence of drama, and not necessarily that you're like thrillingly happy all the time.
Mm. Mm. And like I said before, I mean, there is something very radical about this because the world runs on problems, fixing this problem, taking care of that problem. A lot of communication between people is about problems. Like, before I realized what I was doing, I was communicating about problems all the time. That was my way of relating to people.
Well,
What
when
wasn't
we
good, what should be better, what should be fixed, what should be taken care of, and what's unacceptable, and
there starts to
endless.
be but from this place of contentment, when you are speaking with somebody or someone, when you're in the room with someone or taking a walk with someone, there isn't so much to say.
No,
Because
right.
Generally most of our speech with other people is egoically driven. It's mostly judgments and opinions and desires and stories and strategies and what's going to happen in the future and what happened in the past and he said, she said, and it's like as soon as we open our mouths with another person, out comes the egoic mind. It's the egoic stuff. So, that's one reason why spending time alone and, why people go on retreats and silent retreats and so on. Because when you are with this place of peace and contentment and love, what you discover is that there isn't very much to say to another person from this place. There, you might comment on the beautiful sky, or the breeze, or the weather, or you might talk about something that you're interested in, a subject that you're interested in, or there might be some information that you convey about something someone told you that's valuable, but you're not gossiping, you're not telling stories, you're not talking about other people, mostly. And you're not probably you might be talking some about the future, but not in, Nirmal and I still talk, of course, about all sorts of things, but we hold it lightly. When we do talk about the past, the past is so boring. We really don't talk about that much. It's like
it can be very amusing, when you look back and you see the kinds of drama you got yourself into. I mean, it actually can be a source of a good laugh.
And when you're getting to know somebody, it's absolutely appropriate to share history and all of that, of course. I think that it's how you hold it, whether you hold it lightly. It's like we know when it's our ego talking and when it's not. We know when we're blabbing and when we're not. And we take it all lightly, and we surely don't indulge in a kind of really negative, unpleasant, mean-spirited kinds of things that the ego might. But, it might be frivolous.
Mm-hmm.
Frivolous
So,
chatter at times.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
Gina, I'd just like to, because we're coming up to the hour, I'd just like to look at the YouTube chat thread and see what's happening there.
Okay.
So, Bernard D comments, I see it that it's not as much about we create reality than pointing to the part that mind and identification plays in it all. The role of thought, a radical discovery. It's timelessly radical, while quite a while ago the Buddha already had it that we are what we think. With our thoughts we make the world. And it's true, our knowledge is the world we live, as someone else has had it. And there is a comment by Stephen Howard that says, Gina, you're so encouraging to me. Thanks for your kindness and for making things seem so obvious and natural.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
And Wendy Ayot says, loving the absence of drama is a great pointer, rather than seeking simply to move away from drama. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the moving away from can still be a kind of form of a thought-created reality. Like, I need to get rid of the drama. I need to let go of the drama.
Right, right. And the
so
truth...
loving the absence of drama is like, there's something quite natural about that. That's not mind-created. There's a natural movement that's not mind-created.
Yeah. And this being that we are is having fun with it all. It loves the human experience. And so it's not at all rejecting of the suffering or the getting lost in the ego or the bad choices. It's accepting of it all. It created it to be just this way, and it also creates the means to wake up from the suffering. So it's fascinated. It's fascinated by, what is this human being that you are going to choose next? You get to choose. You get to choose whether to get lost in your drama or not. How long are you going to choose that? You get to choose it. It's your choice. It's fine. There's no judgment about that. You can stay lost in it as long as you want. It doesn't matter, because sometime you will wake up from it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Also sometimes things just kind of happen totally surprisingly. Like when I had the idea of organizing this retreat, it came quite, distance to actually doing it on Valentine's weekend was quite short. It was like 4 weeks or so. And, it was a totally surprising kind of thing that just dropped into my mind space. And,
yeah. And Mercury retrograde didn't even stop you.
Well, I guess I've just learned to accept what comes in,
Exactly.
and move with that. But it was a total surprise to me. I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah. Life is fun that way, isn't it? I mean, it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't know what's going to arise out of the flow. And you don't need to. That is the fun of it, isn't it? That's what we just love about stories and movies and novels, is we don't know what's going to happen next. So this would be a terrible world if we knew what was going to happen next. It wouldn't be fun at all.
That's interesting.
The mind thinks it wants to know. It really wants to know, but that wouldn't be an adventure. It would entirely change what this world is to know. You couldn't grow or anything.
And also, I mean, the thing is, there's a sense in which the egoic mind that creates the drama actually always has it that everything's very predictable. Like, when our interactions with others are run by the story of what they're like. And when I do this, he's going to respond like that. And, I knew it, he was going to say this.
Right.
And, there's like no opening for anything else happening. There's no opening in the mind, and therefore nothing else, it's very hard for anything else then to actually happen than what we already see happening in our minds. Sometimes we still get surprised. But it's very much more difficult for that to happen when we're in those stories that already predict what's going to happen.
And the mind doesn't like to be surprised. It assumes it knows, and then it doesn't like to be surprised when the reality of life is that everything's changing, it's totally unpredictable, and you're going to be surprised. It's like the mind is programmed backwards. It's ridiculous. It's programmed to dislike the way life is. Let's just have to face reality. We just have to face reality the way it is. Just see it truly. See how it is. And, instead of how the mind sees it, and then it's fine. It's not a problem. If you just see that reality is predictable in its changeableness. And that's the only way it's predictable. And it's never going to change in that way. It's going to change, but it's never going to be predictable. It's never going to change into a life the way the ego wants it. It's never going to be unceasingly happy. It's always going to be just a mixture of all sorts of different experiences and ups and downs. And, even after awakening or after you are living from this place of love, it's still such a mixture of some days the emotions roll in for some reason. Some days they're there and some days they aren't. Some days are, you're just really clicking along and in the flow, and other days your body's maybe not feeling so well. I mean, you just have to go with whatever is being presented to you, and sometimes it isn't necessarily going to be what you like, but it doesn't matter that you don't like it. That's the whole thing, is seeing through our preferences. Life doesn't go according to what we like or don't like. It's not paying attention to what we like or don't like. That is not life's purpose. And so, just, noticing when you don't like something, and then, just being present to when you don't like something, and then just getting back into the place as best you can of gratitude for what you do like. There's always things that you can find that you can be grateful for. There's so much.
And also, I mean, when we're no longer in the story of, like just to take other people in the story of that person and what he or she's like and what's annoying and what's good about them and whatever. It's like there's openings for other things to happen, and we actually get to discover things that are new to us about that person.
Mm-hmm.
because we're no longer circling in the story of what they're like and what's predictable and how they're going to respond and what they're going to say. And
Yeah.
it creates that opening to being surprised. It creates that opening to something different happening.
Yeah. It's amazing how much our self-images are what each person relates to. It's, I've, Nirmala has a very good image of me in his head. He loves me in part because his image of me is a very positive one. And likewise, I have a very positive image of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I could choose to find something negative and shape that image in a negative way. And that would affect our relationship. That would affect how I felt about him. So, when two people click, isn't it really just about that their self-images are working together? They like each other. Their self-images like each other.
Well, actually, I mean,
There's
I
more
think,
to it than that, but
yeah, it's partly that, but then maybe it's also that the stories are constructed in such a way that they leave enough space open for them to actually meet without the story.
yeah. Or you have
you
good
know
you have good stories and you don't have too many stories. You have a few good stories makes for a good relationship, and then the rest you just leave open, like you said. I think that's really true. I think that when you don't have very many stories, because I'm sure I think it's impossible to not have some images and stories. I just happen to have good stories about him, and he has good stories about me. But if you don't have much, but just a few, then you're left with just an openness, like you said, that allows you to just experience the person in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, when you can just be present to the person in the moment without your stories, then love just naturally flows to that person.
Yes.
And that's what we call being in love.
Mm.
Because you don't have judgmental stories or ideas that are getting in the way and blocking that love from flowing.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're just being present to someone in the moment without the stories is an experience of love.
So, Gina, that brings up for me the question of being with people that are very run by their stories
Hmm.
about themselves and about others. For example, I'm thinking about, the person that came to my mind is my mother, who has certain patterns that are quite strong. And, I used to hate them. I mean, I don't hate them anymore, but they're still there, they're part of who she
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And what's there now is, that there's an acceptance of that. I mean, I'm not trying to change
Mm-hmm.
it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And there is also what's interesting is that I see the limitation that these patterns create for her, because in some ways they really close her off.
Yeah.
And they make the way that she relates to people very narrow. It's like that the range of possible responses is quite narrow.
Yeah.
And I see that, and I sometimes just, there's a compassion with that, because I
Yeah.
know it could be different, right? She could be
Yeah.
more open, but she's not.
Yeah. So you drop the story of she needs to change or she should be different. And
Yes,
that is such a powerful story to drop. That made all the difference.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But
And
it
then
didn't. I
and
mean, sorry,
uh,
go ahead.
well, and then you also took on the the story of she suffers as a result. Well, it's not really a story, but the perception that she suffers as a result allows you to tap into your compassion for her and be with her from that love rather than from a place of judgment.
Yes.
And
Because,
that
there are people there are people that we're surrounded by, that we're in contact with, who are limited in their in their ability to be in a place of just living from love.
Yeah, absolutely.
And meeting them in a way that allows the love that comes from here to continue flowing, that's quite a challenge sometimes.
Yes,
But
it
it
is a
can be,
challenge.
but it can be just very, and that's where I think you can fall in love with the absence of drama. It's just so much sweeter and more gentle and more, it feels more healthy and more whole
Yeah,
to
not just for
be with
you,
them like that,
but for her.
for
It's
her too.
really, yeah, it's healing. That's what's going to
Yes.
heal the ego in other people too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So it is very challenging being with egos and not being put in your own ego.
Yes.
But if
And
you
sometimes it's
can,
a real fun challenge, right? Because, it's like,
real fun.
because you get to really be creative, you get to improvise, you get to kind of just show up there, and you have no idea how you're going to respond this time. All you know is that, it'll be what it'll be. And,
Yeah.
so your own responses become actually quite interesting and quite
Yes.
unpredictable also.
Right. And that is this place of love and presence is a very unpredictable place, and that is what's fun about it. Is when you're present, you're just in a sense listening, and listening to, in the broadest sense, listening with your whole being to the experience and responding naturally. And that's just fun. It is fun to just be there in the moment and respond naturally. Because it works, because you find yourself saying the right thing and that feels good, or you find yourself feeling loving and that feels good, or accepting. All of that feels good. And so it really is the only way to be with people. Otherwise, being with people is really hard.
Yes, it's tough going.
Yeah.
So, Gina, there are two more comments here that I see. G.R. Gordinier. Thank you, Gina, for your wonderful books and for talking today. You have a wonderful way of communicating a higher spiritual self.
Thank you.
And Bernard says, our relation to mind, or the ego self. I love how the Sufis talk of the three journeys. The journey towards presence, where it's from the ego self with increasing moments of presence. The journey with presence, where there's presence and dealing with ego structures as they arise. And finally, the journey in presence, where all is presence and the ongoing arising of new aspects of it as it reveals its inexhaustible potential, while it spontaneously and effortlessly metabolizes whatever ego structures and patterns that still arise. So the journey towards presence, the journey with presence, and the journey in presence.
Yeah, that's a very insightful description. Obviously written by someone who took the journey.
Yes, yes.
Beautiful.
And what that makes me reflect on is, the journey in presence. I mean, there is a way in which things get kind of thrown up so as to be released. And, and there's a subtle shift in the sense that they get thrown up, but they get thrown up in presence,
Right.
It's no longer kind of, I had it, I lost it, I had it, I lost it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then it's so much easier to heal conditioning when something comes up within presence and is seen from presence.
Yes.
Then I think our spiritual evolution can move really quickly.
And that's where the compassion and the gentle holding is also,
Yeah.
because it arises naturally then about those things.
Yes. And that's what heals. That's what evolves that conditioning.
Right? That's what transforms
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Wonderful. I think that's a very good place to stop.
All right. Thank you, Grace. Wonderful talking with you as usual.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you for coming in again and, sharing with us. There is, I don't know, there's just this, I'm struck by, I'm still struck by this very radical way that you talk about thought. That's been a real present for me. Thank you. Real gift for me. And everything else too. And I'm sure for other people as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing all this. It's really wonderful of you. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
Okay.
Like I said, I mean, it just dropped into my mind space and I just did it.
Okay then.
Yeah. So I'll just close the session for the viewers. Just to say, you watched a session with Gina Lake that is part of the Living from Love online live online retreat. There's one more session coming up today in about 40 minutes time, which is a meditation and sharing session, so it's more interactive. And you're very welcome to join into that. If you want more information about it, go to the website www.living-from-love.com. And you can still register for the retreat also, and you'll get the information for the sessions tomorrow. There's a full day of sessions again tomorrow. So thank you for joining, and I'll see you in 40 minutes. Bye-bye.